All right. So now that I've added my materials, and I am cheating here, by the way, I didn't add all of my materials, but don't tell anyone. All right. But now that you added all of your materials, we're going to go into our rendering settings. Okay. So the rendering settings is this kind of little blue ball with the finger touching the blue ball. And this is where we're going to quickly just add and adjust the settings before we actually create the render. Okay. So the first thing is setting your camera angle. Where do we want to render this thing from? Okay. Now, I am a big advocate that renders should be taken from the perspective of someone who's actually going to be viewing it, right? Don't I don't like the drone shots. So, if you were looking at the image or looking at the rendering from a drone, it's not realistic because no one will ever look at your project from this angle, right? You could do aerial views, but again, no one's really looking at your building from this view. Aerial views are really good for large building complexes, for large renderings, for renderings of these large building complexes, where you want to be able to see things that are happening behind other buildings. That's when an aerial render is pretty good. But for the most part, the best renders are renders where you're showing what the thing is going to look like from the perspective of someone who's actually looking at it. Right? So I'm going to adjust the camera, place it right here. Remember, you could always place the line the same way that we did the 1 point perspective in previous lectures. Um, you could adjust the camera and do what is it? Camera, place camera and target, where you pick a point where you're going to place the camera, and then you point where you want to point it to. Okay. But I'm just going to slightly eyeball it that a person is about 5 feet, 5'6", so something like that. Right. Let's go with this. So that's the first step. Figure out the angle that you want to render from. Okay. Then we're going to come over here and adjust or just play around with some of these settings. So we have the dimension. What is the dimension of this render? I usually just pick the viewport, but we can select, say, a full HD 1920 by 1080. Okay. The quality of the render. So you'll notice it says quality and then 15 samples, 50 samples, 500, 1500 samples. A sample is how many times it's going to kind of run past and render the image. So how many passes is it going to take? Just like everything else, when we create stuff, we always have to, take several passes at it before it gets better and better. And with each pass, hopefully your projects become more and more defined. The same is true for rendering. So the more samples, the more passes you have, the clearer and the better the quality of the render. For this tutorial and when we're just starting off, we're going to stick to draft quality. Okay. The reason why is the longer or the better the quality, the more you're pushing the computer, the longer you're going to have to wait. And if you're just trying to see like how is this going to actually look in a render and you don't want to spend too much time, then a draft quality is a good one to start off with. I'll usually do use draft qualities to look at renders, or sorry, to look at materials. So for example, if I really want to know what this concrete floor looks like, even though it's not going to be my final render, I'll go ahead and do a quick draft render of my material, and then before moving on to adding a different material somewhere else, right? So we could use these draft quality renders while we're placing the materials to take a quick look at them to see, is this good, right? So the other place would be like, let's say my interior floor. Do I really like this material? Is the patterning too much? I don't know, right? It kind of looks like maybe it might be too tile-y, right? It looks too much like a tile, but I won't really know until I get to see it in a render. But I don't want to spend a whole lot of time rendering, so I will come over here and do a quick render as a draft quality. Okay. Then I'll see the actual render and say, you know what, that actually is plausible. I could see that happening. Um, So that's why I will go ahead and start with the draft quality. Now, the other thing I'll just keep the same solid white background. That's what I prefer. But you can definitely play around with these different environments. So we have 360 environments, right? Um, you can, let's see if we import environment libraries. We have different libraries, but we're getting, is it an office? Is it an airport? Let's just open up airport and see what that happens. Yeah. So these are like backgrounds. Um, as you can see, there were several different kind of environments to choose from based on your settings. So let's go Rhino. Let's see sunset. See, you could spend so much time on here and have a lot of fun. Yeah, that's not what I want. So anyways, I'm just picking solid color because I'm going to put this rendering in a presentation board. I don't want anything in the background. Okay? We're going to go ahead and come on down. You could adjust the sunlight if we want sun. We could play with the sun settings. So we could actually specify the year, right? And the time. We can even place the location. Let's go right there. Let's pick San Francisco. We'll hit OK. Let's go back to the sun settings and we'll say we want San Francisco in the summer or maybe the winter, like around the evening, something like that, right? And we'll hit OK. So you could play around with a lot of the settings in here, and then let's keep going down. These are all settings we really won't touch on unless you really know what you're doing with the diffuses, the glossy, the transmission volumes, all that stuff. So that's pretty much all of the settings I'm going to choose from. Let's go to the view. Nope. Current render. Nope. So I think we're going to leave it just as is. Um, and once we're ready, we're going to hit this button, render. So I'm going to hit render. And a pop-up window is going to come up with my actual render. And down here in the bottom left-hand corner, it'll tell you the sample, right? And it says 50. So, so that's how quickly it took, to do 50 passes. Let's go ahead and bring that up to 500. It's going to take a little bit longer to render, but it'll be a much higher quality. We could zoom in to the render itself. Right? We can also show, well, we don't have any of the curves, but remember how I was hiding the curves before? That's because by default they're deselected. But if you wanted to show line weights along with the render, you could do that as well. We don't have any points. We don't do dimension. We didn't do dimensions or text, but you have other options to play around with, right? But once you're done with this, once you have the render that you like and you've played around with all the materials, then all you do is hit the save button and you could save it, wherever you'd like, and it'll save it. Actually, let's do a quick save. There we go. Save. Find the location that you want. Let's go back. Oh, let's go into my desktop. Let's just go into materials. Really quickly, how do you save it? There are there are different image files that we can save it as, but the most common image files are JPEGs, PNGs, and TIFFs. Okay. And each one is a higher quality than the previous one. So JPEG is a good image file if you're doing kind of a low resolution, and even you could even do high resolution JPEG image files. But A JPEG image file is the most universal image file, meaning I could send this to anyone around the world, and almost every device nowadays will open a JPEG image file on any device, right? Screens, cell phones, computers, TVs, all different types of devices open JPEG image files. It's the most universal, but it's also not as high of a quality as a PNG. I don't want to say it's the least quality because actually a BMP is a lower quality than a JPEG. So a JPEG is a good image file size. It's just lower quality. Typically renders you want to save either as a PNG or a TIFF. Okay. PNG is a higher quality as a JPEG, and for most renders, a PNG is a good file size. A TIFF is a better one, but it is exponentially larger in file size. So the file is a lot larger, but it is a much higher quality image. So if we were going to do like billboards, if we were doing images for the size of a billboard, a graphic that goes on the side of a wall, then we might consider going with the TIFF. But these renders are for a presentation board, a PNG is going to be the ideal image file that you're going to want to save this as. So that was the last thing I wanted to cover with saving. When you go about saving the files, make sure that you save your file primarily as a PNG file. You can get away with the JPEG as well. Okay. Other than that, that's how we go about rendering in Rhino. Hopefully that helps.